In this video, I am going to look at some of the major themes in the novel Lord of the Flies, which is written by William Golding. Some of the major themes in the novel are civilization versus savagery. We also have a loss of innocence and struggle to build civilization, man's inherent evil. These are some of the major themes, and one of the central concern or um, the fundamental and universal ideas in the novel is the civilization versus savagery. This is one of the major themes, and we are going to look at it in a detailed manner. So let's look at the first theme, civilization versus savagery. This is one of the central concern of the novel Lord of the Flies, and we need to understand the difference between civilization and savagery, and the two different points which they try to portray. The conflict between the two instincts, that is civilization and versus savagery, is the driving force of the novel, explored through the dissolution of the young English boys' civilized, moral, disciplined behavior as they accustom themselves to a wild, brutal, barbaric life in the jungle. So William Golding tries to uh, let the readers know by taking the example of young English boys. You know, the English, the Britishers, they pride themselves in calling themselves as one of the most civilized people on this earth, and they boast themselves, no, we are the most civilized race on this earth, and we have every right to discipline people. So with that, the conflict between civilization and savagery. If we look at civilization and savagery, William Golding is of the opinion that civilization is kind of like a thin veil. So inside the thin veil is the human, the demons, or the badness, human savagery, which can easily come out from within. And civilization is kind of just a thin veil, and it is really actually easy for this savage instinct to come out from within. So if we are not able to control or suppress this savage instincts, human civilization will not flourish. If we look at the meaning of civilization in relation to the novel, the instinct to live by rules, act peacefully, follow moral commands, and value the good of the group. This is something which we need to understand, or we need to know if we are reading this novel Lord of the Flies. If we look at savagery, the instinct to gratify one's immediate desires, act violently to obtain supremacy over others, and enforce one's will. So if we look at the novel, the struggle, the desire for power is one of the central concern, and that is represented by Jack. He belongs to the savage side. And again, one thing which we need to know is also this novel is allegorical, and Ralph represents civilization, and Jack represents all what is evil, the hunger for power and savagery. So the conflict between civilization and savagery might be expressed in a number of ways. For example, civilization versus savagery, order versus chaos, reason versus impulse, laws versus anarchy, or the broader heading of good versus evil. As we read the novel, in the beginning all the boys were united because they were under this thin veil of civilization. But as the novel flourishes, they lose their coolness, or they lose this the rules, regulations, laws, and orders, all that they have learned. You know, they forgot all those rules, and in the end, savagery flourished. William Golding represents the conflict between civilization and savagery in the conflict between the novel's two main characters, and they are none other than Ralph, who represents civilization, and Jack, who represents savagery, or all that is bad about humans. So Ralph, he is the main protagonist who represents order and leadership. He is the one who tries to maintain this civilization, even deep in the jungle, away from civilization. Jack is the antagonist who represents savagery and the desire for power. Golding sees moral behavior in many cases as something that civilization forces upon the individual rather than a natural expression of human individuality. Another thing which William Golding also wants us to know is human goodness. We cannot force others to make us good or to transform ourselves into becoming someone who is morally good, morally right. This whole idea of being good, being kind, being generous, being loving, these are all the traits that has to come out from within. It cannot be taught by someone. So as the novel progresses, majority of the boys, the young boys, they lose all the rules, regulations, the laws and orders that they have learned. And this is one clear example. If we are not inherently good, if that goodness is not from within, and if we try to follow that just because we are being imposed, then sooner or later, when we are alone or when we face difficult problems, then we will be found out. When left to their own devices, Golding implies people naturally revert to cruelty, savagery, and barbarism. So if we are only fearful of laws and orders, rules and regulations, and we try to follow that just because it is imposed upon us, civilization will not flourish, and one day or the other this world will collapse. When left to our own devices, when we're left alone, and when there's no one to instruct us or to advise us, we will be found out, and we will never be able to survive or thrive, and it will be full of cruelty, savagery, and barbarism. This idea of innate human evil, the evil which is within us or inside us, is central. Remember, we have to understand it is the central concern of the novel Lord of the Flies, and finds expression in several important symbols, most notably the beast and the sow's head on the stick. Among all the characters, Only Simon seems to possess anything like a natural, innate goodness. So this is something which I'm talking about earlier. The goodness, it has to be natural. It cannot be forced by others. And if we look at it, it is only Simon who seems to possess anything like a natural innate goodness. He is someone who is like a Christ-like figure, who remains the same from beginning till the very end. Loss of innocence. As the boys on the island progress from well-behaved, orderly children, from one of the most civilized countries in the world, the United Kingdom, for rescue to cruel, bloodthirsty hunters who have no desire to return to civilization, they naturally lose the sense of innocence that they possessed at the beginning of the novel. One very interesting thing is Jack, who represents Savagery, in the beginning boast about themselves as, the most civilized race in the world. Talking about, come on boys, we can do it. We are the most civilized race on this earth. We can survive. But he proudly talked about civilization and as, the Britishers as the most civilized people. But it was him who paved the way for savagery. So in the end, led by Jack, everyone lose their goodness, or they left behind civilization. Even Ralph and Piggy at one instance. Golding does not portray this loss of innocence as something that is done to the children. Rather, it results naturally from their increasing openness to the innate evil and savagery that has always existed within them. So William Golding does not portray, or he does not allow others to influence the kids to become savage or to become evil. Rather, as time passes, they naturally lose this whole idea of togetherness and thriving together as one. Golding implies that civilization can mitigate but never wipe out the innate evil that exists within all humans. It can direct us, or it can command us to follow rules and regulations, law and order, but civilization can never wipe out the innate evil that exists within all human beings. Man's inherent evil, another important theme. The fact that the main characters in Lord of the Flies are young boys suggests the potential for evil is inherent even in small children. William Golding tries to let the readers know by taking the example of young English schoolboys, by letting the readers know that the potential for evil is there in everyone. It's inside us, whether young or old. It doesn't matter. Jack. Again, if we look at the character of Jack, for example, is initially keen for rules and civility, again, which I've talked about. But in the end, he became obsessed with hunting, frightened and empowered by the promise of violence. Another interesting thing about Jack is he got the power. He had the power over all the boys till the time when the boys were scared of the beast, Lord of the Flies. And as long as the boys were scared of it, he had the power, and he took advantage of that. Boys The evil spirit is lurking within us, but don't worry, I'm your leader and I'll take care of you. So the boys were, they felt secured and they pledged their allegiance to Jack, which in the end, led to Ralph being alone with Piggy. Jack's desire to control and subjugate proves more powerful than his desire for empathy, intellect, and civilization, and Jack becomes a brutal leader. Even Ralph and Piggy, at one instance, who both strive to maintain their sense of humanity, ultimately join in on the mass murder of Simon, momentarily surrendering to the thrill of violence and mass hysteria. So William Golding is trying to say that, people who are so strong, who are so rigid in following rules and regulations, they gave up at one point. Even Ralph and Piggy, who both strive to maintain their sense of humanity, ultimately join in on the mass murder of Simon, momentarily surrendering to the thrill of violence and mass hysteria.